Hey everybody, it's Tim from Tadabase here, and welcome back to Build It with Tim. On today's episode, we are revisiting the third video that I ever did for the Build It with Tim series. So way back when we built a Stripe payment system using the Stripe checkout module for a form component. And today we're coming back to that particular video and that app that we built because we're going to build in a discount system. So we're going to give the end user the ability to enter a discount code. We're going to check whether or not that code is valid. If it's valid, we're going to apply the discount and then present the new total to the user for them to make a purchase. And if you need a refresher on how to build that Stripe payment application, the link will be in the description and at the end of the video. Okay, so you have a chance to go back and watch that and build that app if you haven't already. All right, so no more talk. Let's jump in and start building. All right, now as an end result for what we're going to be building today, we have this order form where we have created an order, we have added items to our order, and we have a subtotal, but we want to add a discount code. So I could enter in a discount code, and we're going to check to see whether or not that discount code actually exists and is it valid. And in this case, no, neither one of those things are true. It's not. It doesn't exist and it's not valid. But I could enter in a different discount code and validate and apply the discount that is saved on this particular discount code record. And by doing so, you can see that we have saved 50% on our order here today, and all that's left to pay here is listed right here. And we can check out our order here and we're all set. All right, so we don't have to make that many changes to our data structure. All we really need to do is add another data table so that we can track and store all of our discount codes that we want to use. And we need to make a couple changes to the actual order record so that we can apply a discount code to it. All right, but the key kind of part of this workflow is going to be the Tadabase REST API. So if you've ever used validation rules before, you might notice that we don't have the ability to validate against something from another data table. We only have the ability to validate against whatever the data source is that's attached to the form component. However, you can add a pipe inside of form validation rules. This means that we can basically validate anything we want, whether it lives inside of our application somewhere or outside of our application somewhere. And again, in our case, we're going to be using the Tadabase REST API pipe. We're going to make a simple request to go check whether or not a discount code matches by its name and make sure that it's active. And if it does, then we'll return the values that we need in order to apply the correct discount. All right, so let's start with our discount codes. All right, we're going to add a new data table and we're going to call it discount codes. And we're only going to set up a couple fields here. We're going to have the discount code name. We're going to have a number field to actually track the discount. And in my case, I'm going to do it as a decimal place. So, well, I'm going to do both. I'm going to show it as a percentage when I want to show it as a percentage, but the actual value that gets calculated is going to be based on a decimal. So we're going to do the actual discount amount. Okay, and then we'll set up a number formula for the percentage, and that will be the discount amount times 100. And we'll set that up as a custom currency so that we can make it look like a percentage. All right, and then last but not least, we're going to have a select field, which is going to be the code status. Okay, so we're going to have active codes and we're going to have inactive codes. So this would allow you to run different promotions maybe inside of an application with active codes. And then after a few days, we could go ahead and shut those codes off so that they can't be used anymore. All right, so we'll make up some fake codes here. The first one will be Wowza, and that will be 50% off, and that will be an active code. Whoops, I need to change this to suffix. There we go. 50%. There we go. And then we'll have another one. Let's have it be something like big time, and that will be 25%, and that's currently inactive. All right. So for testing purposes, that's all we need. We just need two codes, one active, one inactive, and all of the fields to be populated. Okay, now the changes that we need to make to our order table are pretty simple as well. All we really need to do is we need to create a text field so that we can store an inputted discount code. We also need to gather the actual discount information and save it on that record. So we're going to start with that text field, and we can just call that discount code. All right, now this is going to give the user the ability to actually like enter and more or less search for a discount code. And again, we're going to validate and reference this other table. And if that code matches, then we'll apply the discount. We're also going to set up a code status here. Right. And the reason why I'm doing a code status is because I want to know when no code has been entered, a code is invalid, or a code is used. So I'm giving myself the ability to add some status codes that kind of live separately, and they can help me out later on if I need them. Right, now the next field that we need is going to be a subtotal. So this is going to be a total of all of the connected order line items. But the difference here from what we had already is that we are going to just start with this value, and we're going to manipulate it later on through whether we are applying a discount or not. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take my existing grand total field here, which is a complex formula doing exactly what I want. All I need to do is just change the name from grand total to subtotal, and we're good to go. Okay, so when we have order line items that are connected for that particular order, we will count up all of those total values here, sum them together, and then we'll get our subtotal. Now, when a discount code is applied and we save the discounted amount value to the actual order record, then we're going to get our final total once we do a little bit of math. Now, in order to do that math, we need to save the discount amount. So I'm going to set up another field just like I did on the discount codes table. It's going to be a number field to store 2 decimal places so that we can transfer over that discount amount. All right, and the last 2 fields that we need is going to be our actual calculated values here. So the first one, we'll do a number formula. This will be amount saved, okay? Because I want to show the user how much they saved from the subtotal by using the discount code. And in order to do that, all we need to do is multiply the subtotal by the discount amount, which remember is saved as a decimal place. So the 50% discount code is going to be a subtotal times 0.5, and that will give us how much money we've actually saved on the whole order. So we'll set up our currency, and that's all we need for that. And then the last field that we are going to need is our last number formula, which is the final total. Now, for this one, we are going to start off with a parentheses, and then we are going to look at our subtotal. Okay, and then we're going to subtract that from a nested calculation. So that nested calculation is going to be the subtotal times the discount amount. And then we're going to close both of the parentheses, and here's our final result. So first, we're going to do the subtotal times the discount amount to get the amount of money that we're actually subtracting from the subtotal, and then we're going to do just that. We're going to subtract that value from the subtotal, and that gives us our final total. And once we configure our currency stuff here, then we're good to go. All right, at this point, we're ready to jump to the page builder, and we can set up our actual components and workflows and logic to let a user enter a discount code. We're going to check to make sure that they've actually entered the correct discount code. If it is the correct discount code, we need to make sure it's currently an active discount code. And then if both of those things are true, then we are going to return the discount amount, save it to the order record, run our calculations, and then let the user check out. Right? It sounds like a lot, but it's actually not that much. So the first thing we're going to do is jump to our order details page. And I've reconfigured the page slightly here just to kind of manipulate and move where the components that I have on the page and make sure that I have them where I want them. All right, but we need to add a couple more pieces of information here. And the first one is going to be the ability to enter a code. So right in between the order detail and the order form, I'm going to add another form. Now, for this form, we actually want to give our users the ability to edit the current order, except all we're actually letting them edit or change is the discount code. All right, so I'm going to display the field for discount code. I'm going to display the field for code status, and I'll show you why here in a moment. I'm going to set this to disabled read only and remove the title from code status. Okay, so all we really want to do in this case is view that particular status. And so if we go and actually take a look at an existing order that we have here or an existing order that we've started, you're going to see that we have our form here now where we have the ability to enter the discount code and our status, which is set to read only or disabled so that the user can't change it. But we can type in one of our codes here. And then when we click save, this is where we want to trigger all the logic that goes and checks whether that code exists or not, whether it's active or not. And then using a record rule, we want to actually apply the discount to our total. Now, before we do that, let's actually put some items into our order just so that we have some values to actually work with. Now, hopping back to the page builder, we're going to go to that order detail page and start to make some adjustments. Now, in order to add a pipe to our validation rule, we first need to make sure that we have a pipe installed. And before we do that, we need to generate a new API key since we're going to be using the Tadabase REST API pipe. After we create an API key, we can hop over to pipes, click the Tadabase REST API, and choose our API key we just generated and click install. Now let me show you the actual API call we're going to be using. We're going to be using the filter by two fields. The reason we want to filter by two fields is because we want to go look into the discount code table and we want to take our inputted code from the user. So if somebody types in wowza, we want to take that value. We want to filter for records in this table where the name is wowza and the status code or the code status is active. Okay, by meeting both of these pieces of criteria, this record will be returned. If somebody enters in Wowza and we are looking for that code by name and where the code status is active, then we will find no results based on the records as they currently sit in this data table. Okay, so that's why it's important that we actually check by two fields rather than just the name, because we only want to find a record by name when the status is active too. Okay, now while we're here, we're going to need to know the field IDs for both of these fields that we want to check. We can do that by going to the Fields tab and then clicking the gear icon and saying Show Field Slug. Now, the discount code name is field 64 and the code status is field 67. If we go back to our pipe, we can configure that pipe by adding these two things, these two fields as default values so that we don't have to set them multiple times. Okay, so the data table that we're going to look in is discount codes, and we'll say field 64 for the first field ID. And then the second field ID will be field 67. We're going to change this from is not to is. Okay, and what this is going to look like when we actually start to filter is we can say go into this table, discount codes data table, find records where field 64 is wowza and field 67 is active. And we're using the and condition to make sure that we are checking for both. Now, when I test this, you can see I found one record that's indicated by this JSON object here inside of our items array. and you can see total items it says is 1. Now, if I change this test value to inactive, you're going to see what this looks like. We return nothing. Okay, we have no objects within our items array, and total items is 0. So that's kind of the base functionality for how this pipe is going to work when we use it in a validation rule. Based on these results that come back from the Tadabase REST API, we can compare based on these results to say, yes, this is a good code, or no, this is a bad code. All right, now there's a couple items out of this particular pipe that I want to save. And to do that, we're going to populate our responses. Okay, I want to check the total items, and um, I also want to save the discount amount, and I'm going to save type just because. All right, now that I populate those responses, they'll be saved here in my responses section of my pipe, and I'm ready to go. Actually, I'm not ready to go yet. I want to change the data type for these. These are going to be numbers, total items, and our discount amount. Okay, now, back to page builder and order details. We're going to go into our order form where we are entering the discount code. And we're going to set up our validation rule. So we're going to add a new pipe, and we're going to choose that filter by 2 fields. And here we have our filter value. We can set to a record value of the discount code that the user enters. And filter value 2 will be a custom value that we send, which is active. Now, if the total items is lower than 1, meaning nothing was found, then we can say whatever our message is, looks like that code isn't available. All right, now let's try that before we move any further. So we know we have 2 codes. I actually don't remember. I think they're both active, or maybe one's inactive. But we know Wowza is active, right? So that should add the code. Okay. Um, if I change it to just wow, we should get our validation rule that's triggered, and that's good. That's the first step in stopping the user from entering a code that's not actually good. Now, what do we do with that afterwards? Is going to determine how that discount code is actually applied. And to apply that discount code, we are going to go back into our form, and rather than a validation rule now, we're going to add a record rule. Now, what's interesting about this is that we're actually going to do basically the exact same thing. We're going to trigger that pipe again, where we are filtering by 2 fields. The filter value 1 is going to be the record value of discount code, and filter value 2 is going to be a custom value of active. Okay, now when that record is found, remember in the validation rule, all we're really checking is does it exist? Okay, but now in the record rule, we're actually going to take the data that we have found for that record when we search for it again, and now we can copy it over. So we're going to take the discount amount and set it to the pipe response of discount amount. Now that is the response that we populated back in the pipe section of our app, and now we are saving that to an actual record value. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the code status to a custom value of code used. Okay, now just for the sake of how this is actually put together, we know that the form can only be submitted when the validation rule is cleared. Okay, and because that's the only possible way that this form could be submitted, we know that this record rule is only going to run when a discount code is valid. So once this form is submitted and the record rule is actually triggered, we can, since we know that that code is good, we can update the code status to code used. Now, to make sure that we're actually getting the discount that we want, we're going to display those calculated values up on our detail component. So let's shuffle this stuff around a little bit. We'll move these fields over here. We'll have our subtotal here. We will add our discount code over here. the amount saved, and the final amount. So this will tell our user, hey, this code works. This is how much you're saving, and this is the final total. Now, because not everybody's going to be using a discount code, we're going to make sure we have hide empty fields actually enabled here on the detail component. Now, before we check that out, I'm going to do one last thing, partially because I need it right now, but I also want to give the user the ability to clear out any code that they may have used previously. Okay, so I'm going to add an action link here, and I'm going to place it underneath the discount code field. And we are going to set this up to number one, we're not going to show the title. And we're going to say remove code for the button or link text. We're going to check other fields. So if the discount code is blank, we're going to hide this value. So we don't want to show this link if a discount code hasn't been added. Then we're going to add our action rule to return fields to a blank value. So we'll say discount code goes to blank value. Code status goes to no code entered. And discount amount goes back to a blank value. All right, now, like I said, I need this because I want to actually remove the code and try this again. So I'm going to remove that code. All right, and now that we're kind of back to blank slate, we can go ahead and do our discount code one more time. And what we should see here when I click save is exactly this. All right, our discount code has been applied, and that code is listed right here. And all that is just displaying this value right here. We have our action link to remove the code, and then we are showing the amount saved and our final total. And if we were to actually go down and enter in our card number here, then this value, the final total, is what we would actually pay. So we started with 1,034. We entered in a discount code that gave us 50% off. Here's our amount saved and our final total. Now, I know most of our time was spent kind of talking about the pipe itself and how we're going to be using it inside of validation rules and record rules, but it's actually not as complicated as I think I made it out to be. All right, all we're really doing with that REST API pipe is we're just setting up a filter. Okay, so if we think about a filter in any other case, where maybe we had a page of discount codes and we only wanted to show discount codes where the discount code name contains whatever we are entering in this case, Wowza, right? And the other condition is that the code status is active. Um, that's all that API request is doing, is we're just setting up a filter and returning records. And then based on whether or not a record is returned or not, we're either validating it or not validating it. And then in the record rule, we are grabbing the actual values out of it. Okay, but I hope you learned something useful today on how you can use pipes inside of validation rules and record rules in order to validate against things that maybe you wouldn't normally consider, at least initially. But once you kind of understand how that process works, then you have a whole new world to explore as far as filtering and validating against things that live in more secluded areas within your application, but also validating against things that live outside of your application. All right. So, anyways, that's it for this week's episode of Build It with Tim. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.